Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning. That means it is time for Sketching and Coffee Live. I am recording this. I'm going to stop for a second here and spritz these watercolors because we like them nice and juicy when it comes time to use them, though I don't know that we'll be using them in the same fashion today. We'll see what happens when we get there because, and let me show you this. This is one book, this is two books, this is three books we finished already. And I didn't realize it yesterday that the Praying Mantis was the last one of this book. So now we're going to start a new book. And my new book that I want to start, I'm not sure will hold up to watercolor. But I like the size of it and I like the feel of it. So we're going to see what it does. It will at least do ink and wash, but I don't know that it'll stand up to watercolor wash. We'll figure that out as we go. This is the time of day that we draw a toy from the toy box, a random object from the Random Object Randomogrifier. We throw one little random toy up on the light stage there, and we draw it and talk about it as much as we can talk about it, because today's subject is a glass squid. And a glass squid, interestingly enough, is something that we know very little about. Do some quick block in here. I want to turn this way. Let's do that. Let's turn it sideways. That way we can get more drawing in. But a glass squid is something that we know very little about because of where they live and how they live and how we found them. And it's pretty crazy. These things live at least 200 meters below the surface of the ocean. Up to, we know for sure up to 2,000 meters, but possibly deeper. And you can't bring them up to study them. The family is about 200 million years old, split off from other squids about 200 million years ago. The blocking was real simple. If you didn't notice, it's just snot on a table. So the blocking was pretty simple. So now we're just going to start putting in some anchor details. But the family's about 200 million years old when they split off from other squids. And the only way we know that is because occasionally we get some mitochondrial DNA from whale stomachs, or occasionally they'll get sucked up in a dredge when we're dredging the sea bottom. Occasionally they'll get sucked up, and maybe some genetic material will survive the dredge, but it's just not something that can happen. That happens very frequently because even the DNA is adapted to the high pressure of living 2,000 meters below the surface. And when I was reading about it, I was thinking that it's kind of like the joke of the New Yorkers trying to move out to the country. They just can't handle the lack of pressure. So these guys, it's almost impossible to get any good studies of them. We don't know how many there are. We don't have a clue about their conservation. We know, I might be talking too fast because it's kind of exciting to me, but we know that they use ammonia instead of oxygen in their swim bladder. I said something to offend my mother, I can tell. And we know they use ammonia in their swim bladder to help them float because oxygen would not work so well at those depths. We know that they eat by letting flotsam float by. We know that they don't actively hunt because you can't at those depths. You can't see. They can't swim around. They can't. It's all about conservation. It's all about energy conservation. And so there's a lack of musculature that you would find in other squid. It's just, this is a really unique specimen for even scientists to study. And again, there's not much they can study. There's just not much opportunity to study. So we don't really know anything about this. I do suspect that this is meant to be a larval stage or juvenile stage, pre-juvenile stage, because it only has 2 tentacles and 2 arms. Squid have 8 tentacles and 2 arms. That is a defining characteristic of squid. And so, considering that this is safari, I'm going to bet they knew that. But they didn't put that it is a juvenile on the. They didn't put that it's a juvenile on the description on the side of the body. It's in very fine print on one of these legs. I had to take a picture of it and blow it up on my phone to make sure I was reading the right thing. But I have to do that at Home Depot to read the signs too, so that's not really saying much. All right, I think we have a pretty good block. Let's see. There's a blue vein going across here. It comes back down here like this. And they've added some coloration, but honestly we don't know. I couldn't tell you if the coloration that they added is at all accurate, because there's not a lot of photos of these things. The only photos you see of them are deep water colorized photos, and the deep water colorized photos are whatever they decided to colorize it, however they decided to colorize them. Because where they are, the light that we see doesn't really make it. So I couldn't tell you how accurate the colors are. I don't think anybody could tell you how accurate the colors are. Alright, and then there's a spot here. And then there's a spot on this one, there's a spot here. And there's a band across here. There's a band across here. Alright. How are we doing on time? It's 5:38, a couple minutes early. How deep did you say they live? My mom's in the chat room. She says, how deep did you say they live? They start at about 200 meters, and they go down to, that we know of, they go down to 2,000 meters. That's that we're aware of. That's how deep we found them. That doesn't mean that they're not deeper. Because, they can go as deep. They could go much deeper because they don't have the same problems we have. Without oxygen in their swim bladder, they don't have problems with gas expansion crushing them. They don't have muscles. They don't have tendons. They don't have anything but pretty much ambient pressure holding them together. And that's one of their defenses, because they have no reflective skin. Their skin is soft and transparent, which means it won't reflect light. And at 200 meters, it's considered the edge of the twilight, the edge of the of the twilight zone, if you will, in the ocean, where there's just enough light that they can see shapes and shadows. They can't make out details, but they can see shapes and shadows. But if you're coming up from below, you can see details. I mean, you can see silhouettes. And so they have non-reflective skin and translucent skin, so that the light will pass through, so that they won't have silhouette. But also, to break up their silhouette, some of them have bioluminescent algae embedded in them. And some of them have just developed bioluminescence on their own, which means they kind of glow in the dark. And what that does is that from below, it allows, not only does it allow light to pass through, not only does their translucent skin allow light to pass through, but it also adds other lights to break up their silhouette from below. So I think all of that's pretty neat, but there's no way to study them to find out more about them. We know that they are a favorite thing for sperm whales to eat, because sperm whales occasionally beach themselves and get dissected. Plus, they've been dissected, over hundreds of years while we were hunting them. Coffee break. Anyway, sperm whales hunt them with echolocation, and we know that they find hundreds of these things in the gullet of sperm whales, but you can't tell what it is because it just turns into jelly, right? The sperm whales, if it is pre-digested, it's exploded and dissolved because of the lack of pressure. The pressure has been removed from it, and so there's nothing holding it together, and even the DNA disintegrates. But if it has, the two things that do survive are the beak, which its beak is modified to be a minimal beak, and they all have a tiny little shell. They're descended from mollusks, and they all have a tiny little shell inside, and so that part still exists, and it survives. It's not digestible by the whale, and so there's they'll find thousands of those in the gullet of the whale, waiting to be expelled. But then the whale dies, and that piece ends up washing up on the shore. So they do know that sperm whales eat a bunch of these things, which to me begs the question about the effectiveness of the transparency and the evolutionary pressures that drove it. Because if you have evolutionary pressure for transparency, it must be because something can see you. But at the depths that they're talking about living, sight isn't the main form of location. It's usually echolocation, or it's by silhouette underneath, or it's by that energy vibes we talked about before. The electric vibes that all life gives off, that, like sharks and other fish, have a special sensory perception that goes around their maw that allows them to sense those kinds of things. So the lack of skin color and variation is not effective against those things. So it begs the question: what could drive that evolutionarily? What is the pressure that drives invisibility, if you will, in an area where visibility is not the main reason for the main way you're caught. And the only thing I could come up with, and there's not really a lot on this because, again, these things aren't very well studied. The only thing I could come up with is energy conservation. It takes energy to create skin. It takes energy to create melanocytes. It takes energy and energy requires more food, and you're in an environment where food is scarce. You have to wait for food to float by. Muscles require energy. And so my hypothesis, if you will, is that they developed a way to conserve energy by being translucent. It had nothing to do with hiding from whales, because it wouldn't work to hide from whales this way. It makes sense to me that it has everything to do with energy conservation, especially considering they're not the only animal to do it. There are lots and lots of translucent animals at those depths. There's no reason to invest in skin color and texture. You don't put your makeup on. Most people don't put their makeup on if they're not going to be seen. So why would these animals get all dressed up just to float around in the dark? Again, this is just snot on a page, so this all goes really quickly. And we're testing out the waters, if you will, because again, this book is not designed for wet. So we may find out that this is the only one of these that I actually get to use watercolor on. We may find out that from now on we just have to kind of wet the ink and not spend so much effort worrying about color. Where was I? So yeah, my hypothesis is that they're translucent as hatchlings. So when they're eggs, they lay their eggs in much shallower water, where transparency would be a huge benefit to them. So there's the possibility that they just carried that on down into the depths with them. But this is all conjecture. I mean, it's all conjecture because there's no way to study it. There was talk about trying to pressurize them to bring them up to the surface so that they could study them, but there's no real way to do that because if you think about it, they can't just pressurize the animal, right? They have to pressurize the animal's food. So you've got the snot that's got to be kept under pressure, and then you've got the plankton that's got to be kept under pressure, and you have to have enough plankton and a way to transfer the plankton under pressure to the squid, to the glass squid, and he's got to and it's got to be enough plankton that it can just float by the squid to catch, because the squid's not going to hunt for it. So there's just no feasible way to bring these things to the surface for study. And we can't feasibly hang out at 200 meters without equipment to keep us alive. And even if we could, the likelihood of us finding very many of these is slim to none. We discovered them in the 1800s, dredging the bottom of the ocean for crustaceans. And the only way we knew it was a squid was because we found the beaks. And the taxonomists were like, well, it's got a beak, so I think it's a squid. We're going to call it a squid and hope we're right. But they really didn't have anything to go off of, because what they dredged up was just a big ball of slime. It didn't stand up to being pulled out of the waters. Didn't stand up to being pulled out of the depths. Now, in popular media, these are not unknown to popular media. We just don't know enough about them. But they inspired the alien monsters, if you will. They're not really alien monsters, but the alien presence in the movie The Abyss. We talked about The Abyss a couple of weeks ago. That's the movie where Ed Harris puts on that suit that fills his lungs with liquid, with highly oxygenated liquid, so that he can breathe at deep pressures and won't get crushed. And the aliens, and they're not aliens to Earth, they're aliens to us. The aliens that live at the depth, James Cameron based those, their artists based those on this animal. So they're not unknown to us, and they do show up in some movies and media because of that. How are we doing on time? 5:53. So the premise of the Abyss is that there's animals at the very depth of the ocean, in the deepest, darkest depths of the ocean, that are as intelligent or more intelligent than we are. And they based those creatures on this model. So let's see how this turned out. So there is my version of it in comparison to the photograph that I posted as a reference photo. My overhead camera is acting wonky. There's my version of it compared to the reference photo. Let's see what it looks like from my perspective. Let me eject this camera here. Safely eject. Hang this wire up here so it doesn't cast a shadow. Pop this camera open. We don't want to see me. We want to see. That's a problem. Let's see here how we can do that. So from my perspective, it's kind of hard to see the snot. There we go. That'll do it. There it is from my perspective. So that's what we did today. But see, that's going to hold up to watercolor all right, as long as we don't flood the page. I think that'll be all right. So that's what we did today. The little girl has already pulled a toy for tomorrow, so let's see what that might be. Tomorrow we have. Is this an anaconda or constrictor. It says what does that say? Snack. I can't tell what that says. Some kind of tree snake, I think. I'll have to look into it a little further, but it's a snake of some kind. So we'll have some fun drawing that tomorrow, Saturday. If you're watching this Saturday morning, July 12th, and it's before 5:30 in the morning, then you're watching the trailer, and we're about to draw this. So stick around, and we'll get started on it. But as of today, it is 5:56 on a Friday, and I am going to have to put a fork in this one. Let me sign it real quick. What is today? What did we say today was? Today's the 11th. 11 July 2025. This is our 103rd day. And I'm going to sign this. I think we're gaining subscribers rather quickly on the YouTube channel, and if you've made it this far, this might interest you. When I get to 1,500, I'm going to pick somebody from the crowd, and I'm going to send them one of these little original sketches. When I get to 2,000, if I get to 2,000 followers on YouTube, subscribers on YouTube, we're going to celebrate. I'm going to have a Hawaiian shirt printed up with several of these all over it, and I'm going to give that to somebody. So tell your friends about the show. If you're watching, if you made it this far in the show, tell your friends about it, because you might get a chance to win one of these shirts. But at 1,500, we're at 1,340 right now. At 1,500, I'm going to send somebody an original watercolor, one of these original watercolors. So keep that in mind, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Really do appreciate it. This keeps me accountable to my art practice, and I get to art with my art buddies every morning. So I run down to it. We didn't run the hairdryer this morning. Ivy is going to be so disappointed that we didn't run the hairdryer. But anyway, I digress. Be sure and tune in tomorrow. Same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel. We dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing. That way I know that the lag has caught up with the stream, and I don't have to worry about being cut off mid-sentence.